The air inside Hogwarts had turned into something you could chew. Smoke thick as wool, laced with powdered stone and the coppery tang of blood. Somewhere above, a tower groaned as if the castle had lungs, and the fight had finally gotten deep enough to bruise them. Harry James Potter ran with his wand in a white-knuckled grip, and his breath in ragged strips, his trainers slipping on flagstones slicked by melted wax and spilled potion, and the rain that had blown in through windows blasted into jagged mouths. Hermione Jean Granger was at his shoulder, hair half-burned at the ends, her eyes bright with the furious clarity that came when terror no longer had room to expand. Ronald Bilious Weasley was behind them by a step, taller in the gloom, his freckles blurred beneath soot, his jaw working as if he were grinding down fear with his teeth. They had come back from the room of requirement smelling of basilisk venom and cursed fire, from the scream of a cup melting into nothingness. They had expected, stupidly, desperately, that destroying one more piece of Tom Marvolo Riddle's soul would change the taste of the air. It hadn't. Hogwarts still bled. Ahead, a knot of fighters clashed in the corridor, spells crisscrossing in violent threads. A Death Eater's curse, sickly green, splintered a stone gargoyle, showering the floor with chips that skittered like teeth. A Hufflepuff boy, barely older than 14, screamed as a hex took his knee, and he went down hard, palms slapping wet stone. Harry shoved past him, shoving guilt down with his heel because there was no time, and shouted a shield charm that snapped into place just in time to catch a shower of glass. "Harry!" Hermione's voice cut through the din like a blade. Left. He saw it, a masked figure lifting a wand with lazy confidence, aiming for the cluster of students huddled behind a toppled cabinet. Harry's own curse met theirs midair, sparks erupting, the collision sounding like a hammer on iron. The Death Eater staggered, surprised, and Ron's stunner caught him squarely. The body hit the wall and slid down, mask clacking. "There," Ron panted, pointing with his chin. "Great Hall. They're pushing them back." The castle shifted again, deep and sick. Somewhere a scream rose and cut off as if someone had put a hand over the world's mouth. Harry felt the sound more than he heard it. It tunneled straight into the place where the prophecy lived in him, where Tom's name was a scar that refused to become ordinary. They rounded a corner and almost collided with Minerva McGonagall, her hair wild, her face drawn and sharp as carved stone. There was blood on her cheekbone. Someone else's, Harry couldn't tell, and her wand arm shook with fatigue. She looked at them as if counting bodies, as if her eyes had learned arithmetic they'd never wanted. "Potter, die." She said his name like a spell that might still hold the castle together. "Where have you—" "Cup's gone," Harry blurted. "It's destroyed." For a second, something like relief flickered, then died, smothered by the weight of what remained. McGonagall's gaze snapped past him, tracking the corridor as a fresh volley of curses slammed into her protego like hail. "We're losing ground," she said, voice low, each word measured as if panic would cost lives. "They've breached the entrance hall twice. Phileas is holding the stairwell. Pomona," her mouth tightened, "is in the greenhouses. We've students still in the corridors. Get to the Great Hall. Find the others. And for heaven's sake, stay together." "Nah." Harry nodded, and the nod felt like agreeing to drown. They ran again. The walls were hot where fire had licked them, tapestries shriveling into black lace. Portraits screamed and flung themselves into frames, fleeing through painted doorways to hide. A silver suit of armor staggered on one leg, crushed, trying to raise a sword it no longer had hands to hold. A group of Slytherins, too young for this, all of them too young, were being herded by a hulking figure with a club. Not a troll, Harry realized in a numb flash. A giant stooping through the broken archway like a man bending under a low ceiling. Its shadow swallowed torchlight. A Ravenclaw girl threw a hex that burst harmlessly against the giant's thick hide, and the giant laughed, a deep booming sound that shook dust loose from the ceiling. Harry's stomach clenched. Move! Hermione shouted to the students, voice cracking. Run now! Harry tried to fire a curse at the giant's face, but a Death Eater intercepted with a shield, laughing through the mask as if this were sport. Ron swore and lunged forward with a roar that wasn't just anger but grief made sound. Hermione grabbed Ron's sleeve hard enough to yank him off balance. Not like this, she snarled. We need you. We. That word was a rope. Harry clung to it, ran with it, while behind them the giant's club came down and stone exploded, and someone's screams scattered into the smoke. They reached a staircase and found it half collapsed, steps buckled like rotten teeth. A stream of injured people flowed down in a panic, a knot of healers trying to drag a boy with a charred arm. A ghost drifted through them, transparent hands reaching toward nothing. The castle was a body in trauma, trying to hold itself together. Harry pushed through, heart slamming, and then, through a gap in the crowd, he saw Severus Snape's name in his mind like a bell struck once, deep and ominous, because he saw someone fall in black robes at the far end of the corridor, and for a split second the shape looked like him. No, Harry whispered, and the whisper was swallowed by smoke. Hermione's hand found his forearm. Harry, she said, urgent, pleading. You said you knew where he'd be. He did. He'd known since the Silver Dew, since the way the world had pointed like a compass toward the Shrieking Shack. His scar burned now, not a spike of pain but a steady fever, as if Tom Marvolo Riddle were somewhere close enough for his thoughts to bleed into the air. I have to, Harry said, and he hated the way it sounded like leaving. Ron's eyes searched his face, and Harry saw the unspoken. We're going with you. We always go with you. And Harry James Potter had never been good at refusing people who loved him. Before he could speak, the corridor shook again, and a gust of cold swept in as if the night outside had pushed its fingers through the stones. Dementors. Harry felt it in the way hope thinned, in the way the edges of the world went gray. Patronus! Hermione cried. 3 bright animal shapes burst into the smoke. An otter, a dog, a stag, silver and fierce, and for a moment the corridor looked like it belonged to the living again. The cold recoiled. Harry swallowed the taste of fear and said, Shrieking Shack. Now, go. Come. And they ran into the dark like people running toward a cliff because the only other option was to burn where they stood. They burst out into the night, and the world slapped them with cold. The grounds were a battlefield painted in firelight, the sky bruised purple and black, sparks swirling like malignant snow. The dark mark hovered above the castle, enormous and obscene, its skull mouth grinning down at towers that had once been safe. Harry James Potter ran across churned earth where footprints and blood and broken wands made a messy scripture. A centaur's arrow shuddered in the ground beside him. From the forest edge came a roar. Giants again, or something worse. The humping willow thrashed like a drowning thing, branches striking at nothing. The entrance to the Shrieking Shack was where he remembered it, hidden beneath roots and damp. They plunged into the tunnel, the earth pressing close, the smell of dirt and old wood and desperation. Hermione whispered Lumos, and the light flared pale and frightened on the tunnel walls. Harry led, mind narrowed to a single point. There. The place where Tom Marvolo Riddle would go to confront Severus Snape. The place where answers would spill, because answers always cost blood. The tunnel spat them out into the shack, and the room was colder than outside. Dust hung thick, disturbed by recent movement. The air had that strange stillness places get after violence, like a pause taken by the world. Severus Snape lay on the floor. For an instant, Harry's mind refused it, skittering away like a hand from flame. Snape's face was pale, shockingly so, his black hair plastered to his forehead with sweat. Blood soaked his robes, spreading in a dark pool beneath his torso. His eyes, usually so sharp, so contemptuous, looked at Harry with an exhausted, almost startled focus, as if he hadn't expected Harry James Potter to be the last thing he saw. Harry began, but the word died. He didn't know what to call him. Professor Dardine. Snape. Dottie. Enemy. Ally. He knelt anyway, because sometimes the body knew what the mind couldn't admit. Hermione hovered behind, wand raised, scanning corners. Ron's face had gone a dangerous blank, the kind that came before something broke. Snape's lips moved. A wet sound came out, half breath, half laugh. You, he rasped, and the word carried a lifetime of bitterness and something else. You have your mother's eyes. Harry's throat tightened so hard he thought he might choke. He'd heard that phrase too often, always like a key turned in a lock he couldn't see. Snape's hand fumbled, fingers slick with blood. He reached for Harry with a desperation that was almost childlike. Harry caught his wrist, feeling how thin it was, how the pulse fluttered like a trapped bird. Take. Snape wheezed. His eyes were bright with pain. It for me. Take it. What? Harry demanded. And the demand was ugly, not because he meant it so, but because fear had sharpened everything. What is it? What did he do? Snape's gaze flicked, past Harry, toward the cracked window. Through it, Harry could see the shimmer of something magical outside, like glass caught in moonlight. A sphere. Inside it, coiled, the gleam of scales, Nagini. And beyond that, an outline in the darkness. Tom Marvolo Riddle's tall, thin silhouette, the elder wand held like a scepter. A gathering of Death Eaters ringed him, their faces pale masks under the dark mark. Harry's scar burned, and for a second the world doubled, as if the pain had split reality into two overlapping sheets. Memories, Snape said, voice collapsing into a whisper. The truth. Harry's hand shook. Why? He spat, because anger was easier than helplessness. After everything, why would you help me? Snape's mouth twisted. Not quite a sneer, not quite a smile. Help, he breathed. Her. And then the thing Harry had expected least. Snape's eyes softened. It was faint, and it lasted only a heartbeat, but it struck Harry like a physical blow. Grief. An old grief, fossilized, kept alive by hate and duty and love turned sour. Snape exhaled, and something like silver mist spilled from his mouth, pouring into the air in a shimmering thread. Hermione gasped as it rose, coiling, and Harry realized with a sick lurch what it was. Memories. A pensive's worth of them, offered in the only language Snape trusted. Take them, Snape whispered, voice almost gone. Look at me. Harry's eyes met Snape's, and in that moment Snape didn't look like an enemy or a teacher. He looked like a man who had carried an unbearable weight for too long, and had finally reached the point where muscles tore and bones cracked. Harry lifted his wand, hands fumbling, and drew the silver threads into a vial with trembling care. The memories swirled, bright and alive, and Harry felt the wrongness of holding them, like holding someone's beating heart. Snape's eyelids fluttered. His hand fell from Harry's wrist. A last breath shuddered through him, and then Severus Snape was still. For a moment the shack was silent except for the distant roar of battle, muffled by earth and wood. Hermione made a small, strangled sound. Ron's hands clenched and unclenched, as if he wanted to punch the world until it made sense. Harry stared at Snape's face. The stillness was too complete. It was the kind of stillness that meant there would be no more answers, unless Harry took them. Outside, Nagini shifted within her shimmering sphere, and Tom Marvolo Riddle turned his head slightly, as if listening to something only he could hear. Harry stood up so fast his knee knocked the floor. The vial was cold in his pocket, heavy as guilt. I need to see these, Harry said, voice rough. Hermione stepped closer. Harry, the battle. I know, Harry snapped, and hated himself for it immediately because Hermione Jean Granger's face flinched like she'd been struck. He lowered his voice, forced air into his lungs. I know. I... But this, Snape, he died for this. I have to know why. Ron swallowed. Where? Harry's eyes flicked to the far wall, to the place where the tunnel would take them back. But he already knew the answer. Not the corridor. Not the Great Hall. Somewhere quiet enough for truth to speak. The headmaster's office, he said, and the words tasted like something final. They moved like thieves leaving a crime scene, backs bent, hearts hammering. Behind them, Severus Snape lay alone in the dust, and the blood beneath him cooled, and the world kept breaking. Getting back into the castle felt like crawling into the mouth of a wounded beast. The corridors they crossed were lit by intermittent flashes of spellfire that turned faces into masks, and then back into human again. Twice they had to flatten themselves into alcoves as Death Eaters sprinted past, cloaks snapping like wings. Once they passed a group of house elves dragging injured students by the shoulders, their enormous eyes wet with panic, their small bodies shaking with the strain of defying a master's war. The staircase to the headmaster's office was intact, though scorched. The gargoyle at the entrance looked more chipped than usual, as if even stone had taken blows tonight. Harry James Potter stopped before it, chest heaving. The password rose to his tongue and died. He didn't know it. Of course he didn't. This was a door that had always been opened by people with authority. Albus Dumbledore, Severus Snape, and Harry had never belonged on the other side. Hermione's voice was tight. Try, Dumbledore. Harry's scar pulsed as if laughing. He stared at the gargoyle, mind blank, and then, absurdly, the word came. Dumbledore, he said, feeling foolish. The gargoyle slid aside as if it had been waiting. The staircase opened, winding up into shadow. They climbed quickly. The office smelled like old parchment and lemon polish beneath the overlay of smoke. Portraits of former headmasters lined the walls, some sleeping, some awake with eyes too watchful. The perch where Fawkes had once sat was empty. That emptiness hit Harry with unexpected force, a reminder that even miracles left. The pensieve sat in the center of the room, a stone basin that looked indifferent to war. Harry's hands shook as he pulled the vial from his pocket. He uncorked it. Silver light rose, coiling like breath in winter. Hermione hovered near the door, wand raised, listening for footsteps. Ron took the other side, jaw set, scanning the room as if expecting Death Eaters to burst out of portraits. Harry poured the memories into the pensieve. The surface churned, turning liquid, shining with threads of time. He stared down at it, and for a heartbeat he wanted to turn away. Not because he didn't want answers, but because answers meant there were still things he hadn't been told, still layers of his life that had been arranged by other hands. He took a breath that tasted of smoke and bent forward. The world tipped. Cold replaced heat. Silence replaced distant screams. Harry found himself standing in a dimly lit room filled with stacks of parchment. Severus Snape sat at a desk, younger, his face sharper, his hair lank. Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore stood nearby, hands clasped, expression grave. "You have kept him alive," Snape said, voice bitter. Dumbledore's eyes were sad. "I have tried." Harry's stomach tightened. He stepped closer, but neither man could see him. He was a ghost in his own history again. Snape's lip curled. "For what? So that he can die at the right moment? You have used him." Dumbledore's voice was quiet. "Yes." Harry felt the word like a punch. Dumbledore continued, "We have all been used by fate, Severus, and by Tom Riddle's choices." The memory shifted, flickering. Another scene. Dumbledore's office, the same room but years earlier. Snape stood with his wand out, fury in his posture. "You told me you had kept her safe," he shouted, voice breaking. Dumbledore looked as if he'd aged a decade. "Lily Potter is dead," he said gently. Harry's chest constricted. He wanted to scream. He wanted to claw the memory apart with his hands. Snape's face twisted with anguish so raw Harry almost didn't recognize him. Then I want him to die, Snape hissed, meaning James. But his eyes darted to a cradle in the corner, to a baby with black hair. I want him... Dumbledore's voice cut through. You disgust me. And then, later, Snape's do Patronus leaping into existence. Dumbledore staring at it, voice almost a whisper. After all this time? Always, Snape said, and the word was like a curse and a prayer combined. Harry felt something in him splinter, not into hatred, not into forgiveness, but into a new, unbearable understanding. Love could be monstrous too, could carve people into shapes they didn't recognize. The memory shifted again. Dumbledore and Snape in a darkened room, the air heavy with secrets. The boy must die? Snape said, voice low, horror leaking through his usual contempt. And Voldemort must do it, Dumbledore replied. Harry's blood went cold. Snape's face contorted. You've been raising him like a pig for slaughter. Silence. Dumbledore's shoulders slumped. Don't tell me now that you have grown to care for the boy. I have. Snape snarled, and then the anger drained, replaced by something like despair. For Lily's sake, yes. But, he swallowed, if he must die, let him die knowing why. The memory turned, and Harry was suddenly in a scene he recognized. Snape standing on a hill, watching from a distance as Harry, Ron, and Hermione trudged through snow. Snape's Patronus, the silver doe, danced between trees like a promise. Snape's face in that moment looked, not kind, but intent, focused, protective in the strangest way. Then Dumbledore again. Dumbledore's voice, firm. When the time comes, Severus, you must give him the memories. It is essential. He must understand. Harry stumbled back in the memory, heart slamming. Understanding flooded him like ice water. The piece of Tom Marvolo Riddle's soul inside him. The way the scar sometimes felt alive. The way Voldemort could see through his eyes. The way Harry had been connected, tethered, contaminated. He was a Horcrux. And the only way to destroy that piece was to destroy him. The memory shattered into fragments. Dumbledore talking about blood, about protection, about how Voldemort had taken Harry's blood and anchored Lily's sacrifice in his own veins. A thin thread of hope. Harry might survive if Voldemort killed him. Might. But that wasn't a plan. It was a gamble with Harry James Potter as the coin. Harry's breath came in sharp, painful pulls. He didn't realize he was crying until his vision blurred. He felt Hermione's hand on his shoulder, real, not memory, pulling him back. The office snapped into place. The smoke, the portraits, the cold stone. Harry's knees hit the floor. He clutched the edge of the pensieve as if it were the only thing keeping him from falling through the world. Ron knelt beside him, expression wild. What is it? Harry tried to speak. The words were stones in his throat. I have to die, he managed, voice cracking. He has to kill me. Hermione's face went paper white. No, she whispered. No, Harry. There has to be another way. There always is. Harry looked up at her, and the love in her eyes was a pain he couldn't bear. There isn't, he said. Not for this. Outside the shattered window, the dark mark pulsed, patient. Somewhere below, Tom Marvolo Riddle was still alive, still hunting, still turning their world into ash. Harry James Potter pushed himself to his feet. Where are you going? Ron demanded, panic threading through anger. Harry's hands stopped shaking. A strange calm settled over him, as if his body understood before his mind could argue. He swallowed hard. To the Forbidden Forest, he said. To end it. Hermione's eyes filled, and her voice broke. Harry. He didn't let her finish, because if he did, he would stay. He would choose the comfort of their company over the brutal logic of necessity. And people were dying downstairs while he hesitated. He stepped back from them, and for the first time in their friendship, Harry James Potter looked at Hermione Jean Granger and Ronald Bilious Weasley, and knew he was going to leave them behind. He hated himself for it. But he turned anyway. The walk to death was made of corridors Harry James Potter had walked 100 times. He moved through Hogwarts like a ghost wearing his own skin. The noise of battle rose and fell around him, sometimes close enough to vibrate in his teeth, sometimes distant as if coming from another world. He kept his wand down. He kept his face blank. He didn't let his eyes linger on bodies. If he did, he would break apart into 100 pieces and never make it out of the castle. At the landing near the 7th floor, the air shifted with the familiar prickling sensation of something secret. The tapestry of Barnabas the Barmy hung askew, singed at one corner. A cluster of students stood nearby, wands raised, faces pinched with exhaustion. Neville Longbottom stepped out from the shadow of the tapestry as if the castle itself had pushed him forward. His nose was bloody, one eye swollen, his robe ripped at the shoulder. But he stood straight, and there was a stubborn light in him that made Harry's chest ache. Neville held the invisibility cloak in both hands like a relic. "Harry," he breathed, and the way he said it was a prayer. Harry forced himself to stop. He didn't have time. He didn't. Yet, he couldn't simply walk past Neville Longbottom's loyalty like it was furniture. "Neville," Harry said. His voice sounded wrong. Too calm, too steady. "I need you to do something." Neville's grip tightened on the cloak. "Anything?" Harry looked past him and saw Ginevra Molly Weasley leaning against the wall, her hair stuck to her cheeks with sweat. There were tear tracks through the soot on her face. Her eyes met Harry's, and the world narrowed to that look. Love, fear, understanding, and a sharp, furious refusal. Ginny took a step toward him. "Don't," she said, and it was not a request. Harry's throat clenched. He wanted to tell her everything. He wanted to kiss her until the world went away. He wanted to fold himself into the warmth of being alive with someone who wanted him alive. But he had already stepped onto the path. He could not step off without turning everyone else's death into something meaningless. "I'm sorry," Harry said, and the apology was too small for the thing he was doing. Ginny's eyes flared. "You can't decide this on your own." Harry swallowed. "I have to." Neville's gaze flicked between them, bewildered, hurt, and then, because Neville Longbottom was braver than most people would ever understand, he nodded once, sharply, as if accepting an order. Harry reached out and took the cloak from Neville's hands. For a second the fabric was warm, as if it held the memory of everyone who had ever hidden beneath it. Harry wanted to take it with him, wanted to disappear into death unseen. But he couldn't. Not if he wanted the plan, the gamble, to work. He draped it back over Neville's arms. "Keep it," he said. "You're going to need it." Neville blinked. "What are you?" Harry leaned closer, keeping his voice low enough that only Neville would hear. "The snake," he whispered. "Nagini. She's the last Horcrux." Neville's face changed, understanding dawning like sunrise over a battlefield. "Right," he said hoarsely. "Right. I'll..." Harry nodded, because if he spoke more, he would sob. He turned to Ginny, met her eyes one last time. "Stay alive," he said, and the words were brutal in their simplicity. Ginny's lips trembled. She didn't answer. She couldn't. She just stared at him as if trying to memorize every line of his face, as if memory could be armor. From down the corridor Minerva McGonagall's voice rang out, commanding, "Rod Dod B. To the Great Hall! Now! Move!" Students surged past, carrying the injured, dragging the terrified. The castle shook again, and dust fell like ash. Harry stepped back. He felt as if he were ripping his own heart out and leaving it in the corridor. Neville reached out, fingers brushing Harry's sleeve, a silent promise. Ginny didn't move, frozen in anger and grief. Harry turned away before he could see her cry. He went down the stairs, into the smoke, into the noise, toward the doors that led out onto the grounds and the waiting dark of the forbidden forest. The night outside had teeth. Harry James Potter crossed the courtyard with his hood up, though the hood did nothing against the bite of fear. The castle behind him roared. Spells, fire, screams. The dark mark loomed overhead, the skull's mouth open as if swallowing the stars. He kept his shadows, slipping behind toppled statues and fallen beams. Twice he saw bodies and forced himself not to look too closely. Once he nearly tripped over a broken broomstick and had the absurd thought that someone would be furious about the damage, some teacher years ago, before war made everything cheap. At the edge of the grounds, the forest waited, black and dense. The trees stood like a wall of judges. Harry's hand found the snitch in his pocket. His fingers were numb, but the metal was warm, as if it recognized him. For a heartbeat he wanted to leave it, to walk into death with nothing but his own breath. But there was comfort in ritual, even when the ritual was a trap. He raised the snitch to his mouth. "I open at the close," he whispered, and the words drifted into the cold like smoke. The snitch's seam split. A small stone dropped into his palm. Gray, ordinary, flecked. Nothing like the thing it was. The resurrection stone sat there with the quiet indifference of a pebble. Harry stared at it, throat tight. His scar throbbed, and in that throbbing he felt Tom Marvolo Riddle's presence somewhere ahead in the forest. A cold, reptilian patience. Voldemort was waiting. Voldemort was certain. Voldemort believed the world had already bent. Harry closed his fingers around the stone. "I'm ready," he thought. Not to die, not really. Because who was ever ready? But ready to stop running. He turned the stone in his hand 3 times. The air changed. It wasn't dramatic. There was no thunder, no flare of light. The world simply softened at the edges, as if the veil between the living and the dead was thin as mist in this place, in this night. Shapes appeared beside him, walking with him as if they had always been there. James Potter, tall and messy-haired, with the same stubborn jaw Harry saw in the mirror. His eyes were kind in a way Harry had never been able to imagine. Not from photographs, not from stories. He smiled, and the smile cracked something open in Harry's chest. Lily Evans Potter walked on Harry's other side, her red hair catching the firelight in faint silver. Her face was young, too young, and her eyes were green, bright, alive. Harry's breath hitched. He had spent his whole life being told he had her eyes, but he had never understood what it meant until he saw her looking at him with love that had never had time to become complicated. Sirius Black appeared with a grin that was more sorrow than humor, his hair falling into his eyes. He looked thinner than in Harry's memories, more like the man who had escaped Azkaban than the reckless boy in stories. But his presence was a warmth at Harry's back, a hand that would steady him. Remus John Lupin was there too, his face lined, his eyes gentle and tired. Harry's throat tightened with the fresh wound of loss. The thought of Teddy, of a baby who would grow up without parents, stabbed him. They walked with Harry James Potter toward the forest like a procession. Harry's eyes blurred, and he didn't wipe them. He let the tears come and fall, because there was no point in pretending, not now. "Does it hurt?" Harry asked, voice small. He wasn't sure who he was asking. Lily's hand brushed his, and though it was not warm, it felt real enough to make him shiver. "Dying?" she said softly. "No, not like you think." James looked at him, pride and anguish tangled in his face. "You've been so brave," he said, and Harry almost laughed because he didn't feel brave. He felt like a boy, walking to a punishment he didn't understand. Sirius' voice was rough. "It's quick," he said. "And we're here." Remus nodded, eyes shining. "You won't be alone," he said. "Not ever." Harry swallowed hard. "Stay close," he whispered. "Always," they murmured, and the word echoed in Harry's mind like a bell. He stepped beneath the first trees. The forest swallowed him. The air turned damp and earthy, thick with moss and rot and the sharp scent of fear. Branches clawed at his clothes. Somewhere an animal cried out and then went silent. Tom Marvolo Riddle's presence grew sharper in Harry's scar, a cold spike of anticipation. Harry felt the connection between them like a chain pulled taut. Voldemort was close. Voldemort was looking through Harry's eyes without knowing it. Harry walked deeper, his parents and godfather and Remus flanking him like pale guardians, and the path ahead seemed to narrow into a single point. A clearing, a circle of dark figures, and the end of everything. The clearing opened like the mouth of a trap. Torches burned and iron brackets hammered into trees. Their light painted the Death Eaters in flickering orange, turning masks into skulls and eyes into glints. The ground was churned by boots. Leaves lay crushed and wet. The air smelled of smoke carried from the castle and the metallic tang of magic. Harry James Potter stepped into the ring of light, and the forest seemed to hold its breath. His ghosts stopped at the edge, and though they didn't speak, Harry felt them press close, a cold comfort. He kept walking until he was a dozen paces from Tom Marvolo Riddle. Voldemort stood tall and thin, his pale face almost luminous in the torchlight. The Elder Wand rested in his hand like it belonged there. He looked at Harry with the serene satisfaction of a predator who had finally cornered prey. Around him, the Death Eaters leaned forward, hungry for spectacle. Bellatrix Black Lestrange trembled as if she might come apart, her eyes wide and adoring. Lucius Malfoy stood stiff, his face tight with something like fear. Narcissa Black Malfoy hovered near the back, pale, watching with a stillness that was not devotion. Voldemort smiled, and the smile made Harry's scar burn hot. "Harry Potter," Voldemort said, voice soft, carrying easily. "The boy who lived." Harry didn't answer. There was nothing to say. Words were too small for what was happening. He held his wand loosely in his hand, not raised, not ready, because he had come to die, not to duel. Voldemort's red eyes narrowed slightly. "You have come," he said, as if pleased with the world's obedience. Harry felt his heart pounding, felt the fear rising like bile, and he swallowed it down. He stared at Voldemort's face and saw not a monster, not even a man, but an absence, an emptiness that had eaten everything around it and still demanded more. "I know what you are," Harry said, and his voice sounded distant to his own ears. "I know what I have to do." A ripple of amusement went through the Death Eaters. Bellatrix giggled. Voldemort lifted his wand a fraction as if calming them. "You think you understand?" Voldemort said, and there was something almost curious in his tone, like a scientist peering into a jar. "You have always been arrogant, Harry Potter, always believing yourself special." Harry's scar flared. Voldemort's thoughts brushed against his, cold and sharp. Images flickered. Hogwarts burning, bodies, fear. Voldemort's satisfaction. Voldemort's certainty that the war was ending tonight. Harry's fingers tightened around the resurrection stone in his pocket. His ghost seemed to press closer. "I'm not special," Harry said, and the truth of it steadied him. "I'm just the one you chose." Voldemort's smile thinned. "Yes," he said softly. "The one I chose, the one I marked as my equal." His eyes gleamed. "And now the circle will close." Harry's breath fogged in front of his face. He could hear the distant roar of the castle, the muffled thunder of spells. People were still fighting. Hermione Jean Granger and Ronald Bilious Weasley were still alive, maybe, somewhere, and Harry had to believe this mattered. Voldemort lifted the Elder Wand fully. The torchlight caught the pale wood. The Death Eaters went still, reverent. Harry did not raise his wand. He didn't defend. He didn't flinch. He looked at Voldemort, and in that moment he felt a strange pity, because Voldemort would never understand what it meant to choose death for someone else. Voldemort's voice was almost tender. Avada Kedavra. Green light erupted, brighter than torch flame, and for a heartbeat the world was nothing but that terrible color. Harry James Potter felt the curse hit him like a hammer made of cold. There was no pain at first, only an overwhelming sense of being pushed out of his own body, out of the world, away from sound and warmth and weight. He fell. The forest vanished. And then there was nothing. Harry James Potter opened his eyes, and the first thing he thought was that he had gone mad. He stood on stone tiles that stretched into a haze. The air was clean, too clean, smelling of nothing at all. Light filled the space without a source, pale and gentle, as if the world here had never known fire. It looked, impossibly, like King's Cross, only empty, stripped of sound, stripped of the press of crowds. No trains, no voices, no time. Harry's chest rose and fell, and the fact that he could breathe was confusing. He looked down at himself. He was whole. No blood, no torn robes, no pain. His scar, it did not throb. It was quiet. That quiet felt like a missing limb. He turned, and his heart stuttered. Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore stood a short distance away, wearing robes of soft gray. His hair and beard were the same silver as Harry remembered, but he looked less like a headmaster and more like an old man, tired, gentle, real. His eyes were bright behind his half-moon spectacles, filled with a sorrow so deep it seemed to have carved him into shape. Harry's throat tightened. "Professor," he said, and the word was a confession. Dumbledore smiled faintly. "Hello, Harry," he said, as if they had met for tea. Harry took a step forward, then stopped, because something moved near a bench. Something small and writhing, making a faint sound that was not quite a cry, not quite a breath. Harry's stomach lurched. He looked, and the thing he saw was wrong. A small, flayed-looking creature curled on the stone, twitching, shivering, as if suffering had become flesh. Harry's mouth went dry. "What is that?" Dumbledore's gaze followed Harry's, and his face softened with something like pity. "That," he said quietly, "is what remains of Tom Riddle's soul that was inside you." Harry stared, unable to move. The creature made a tiny, miserable sound, and the sound pierced him. He had hated Voldemort. He still hated him. But seeing this piece of him, damaged, helpless, made Harry feel sick in a way hatred never had. "So it's gone," Harry whispered. "The Horcrux." "Yes," Dumbledore said, voice gentle. "It is destroyed." Harry swallowed hard. His mind raced, trying to grab hold of logic. "Then I'm dead," he said, and the words felt absurdly calm. Dumbledore's eyes met his. "That is up to you." Harry's breath caught. "What?" Dumbledore gestured, and Harry realized that the space around them wasn't truly King's Cross. It was an in-between, a place shaped by Harry's mind because Harry needed something familiar to stand in, while the universe asked an impossible question. "You have a choice," Dumbledore said. "You can go on, or you can return." Harry's heart slammed. "Return to what?" he demanded, because anger was easier than fear. "To die again? To keep fighting? To watch everyone I love?" Dumbledore's expression tightened. "To give them a chance," he said softly. "To finish what has begun." Harry's mind flashed with Hermione Jean Granger's face, Ron's, Ginny's, Neville's, the castle burning, the dark mark, the Death Eater's laughter. The thought of Tom Marvolo Riddle alive, victorious, was unbearable. But there was something else too, a strange thread of hope. Dumbledore had said Tom's soul piece was destroyed. Voldemort had used Harry's blood to bring himself back. Lily's protection lived in Voldemort. It had tethered Harry to life. Harry looked down at his hands. They were steady. He felt different. Lighter, as if a weight he hadn't realized he carried had been lifted. "Why didn't it kill me?" Harry asked. "He cast the killing curse." Dumbledore's eyes twinkled with something like grim amusement. "Tom Riddle did kill you, Harry," he said, and Harry's stomach dropped. "Or at least, he killed what he could reach inside you. But you were not entirely at his mercy, not because of prophecy, not because of luck." Dumbledore's gaze softened. "Because of love. Your mother's sacrifice, living in his blood. It gave you a chance to come back." Harry's throat burned. "And if I go back, can I kill him?" Dumbledore did not answer immediately. His silence was heavier than any word. "You know," Harry said, voice shaking. Dumbledore nodded slowly. "You know what must be done," he said. "The Horcruxes must all be destroyed. Then Tom will be mortal. Then," he hesitated, sorrow carving his features, "then he can die." Harry's mind flashed to Nagini, the snake in her shimmering sphere. The last Horcrux. Harry's chest tightened. "But he'll win," Harry said, and his voice broke. "He's winning right now." Dumbledore's gaze was steady. "He may win battles, Harry," he said softly. But there are different kinds of victory." Harry stared at the writhing piece of Voldemort's soul. It made another small, miserable sound, and Harry felt his skin crawl. "If I go back," Harry whispered, "I'm mortal. I'm not." He couldn't say it. "Not a Horcrux. Not tethered by the same magic. I can die." Dumbledore's smile was sad. "We all can," he said. Harry closed his eyes. In the clean, silent air, he could almost pretend this was peace. He could almost step away from war. He could almost leave the world to whatever it became. Then he saw Hermione's face again, fierce and frightened. Ron's stubborn loyalty. Ginny's refusal. Neville's battered courage. The children in corridors. The house elves dragging bodies. The castle that had given him a home. Harry opened his eyes. "I'm going back," he said, and the words were not brave, not heroic. They were simply the only thing he could live with. Dumbledore nodded, as if he had known all along. "Very good," he whispered. The pale light shifted. The stone platform trembled. The sound of battle rushed back like a tide. Harry James Potter took one last breath of clean air. And then he plunged back into pain and smoke and the brutal weight of life. Pain came back first. It slammed into Harry James Potter as if his body had been a door kicked open. Cold mud seeped into his hair. Leaves stuck to his cheek. His lungs convulsed, trying to remember how to draw air. He kept his eyes closed. He kept his body limp. He lay in the forest like a corpse because that was what he needed to be. Around him, voices moved like predators. "Is he dead?" someone whispered. Bellatrix, breathless with delight. Tom Marvolo Riddle's voice answered, calm as ever. "He is dead," Voldemort said, and there was satisfaction in the certainty. "I have done what no one else could do." Harry's scar was quiet. That quiet was terrifying, like a world without a heartbeat. He focused on small sensations, the itch of a leaf against his lip, the damp chill sinking into his spine, the weight of his own blood still moving under skin. A hand grabbed his hair, yanking his head back. Harry's body wanted to react, wanted to twist, to fight, to breathe hard, but he forced it still. He heard Lucius Malfoy's breath hitch. He smelled expensive cologne mixed with smoke. "Move," Voldemort said. The grip released. Footsteps circled him. Harry sensed Voldemort above him. The Elder Wand angled down, as if Voldemort wanted to confirm the finality of it. Harry's heart slammed so hard he was sure they would hear it. Then a different presence knelt beside him, robes brushing the ground. Harry recognized the scent faintly, perfume and fear. Narcissa Black Malfoy. Her breath came shallow. Harry could feel her gaze on him like a touch. He could feel the tremor in her hands, the desperate calculation. And then, very softly, so softly that it might have been the forest speaking, Narcissa whispered, "Is Draco Lucius Malfoy alive?" Harry's throat tightened. Draco. In that one question, Harry heard a whole world. A mother's terror. The war's cruelty. The way Tom Marvolo Riddle had used everyone's fear as a leash. Harry did not open his eyes. His lips barely moved. "Yes," he breathed. Narcissa's breath shuddered. For a heartbeat, her hand hovered near Harry's chest, as if she might touch him, as if she might beg. Then her fingers pressed lightly into his skin, feeling for a heartbeat she now knew was there. Her voice rose, louder, clear enough for the ring of Death Eaters. "He is dead," Narcissa said. The lie landed like a stone in still water. There was a moment of silence, then Bellatrix's laugh, and Voldemort's low, satisfied hum. Harry felt something fierce and grateful twist inside him. Narcissa had just risked everything. For her son. For a chance at a world where Draco Lucius Malfoy could still breathe. Voldemort's voice floated above Harry. "Good," he said. "Now we return to the castle. They will see what happens to those who defy me." And someone grabbed Harry under the arms. His body jolted, and he let it go limp again, an ugly marionette being dragged. Chains clinked nearby. A ragged sob rose and was smothered. Rubeus Hagrid. Harry wanted to cry out. He wanted to tell Hagrid he was alive. He wanted to tell him not to despair. But he lay silent, pinned beneath the weight of his own plan. Hagrid's voice broke the air anyway. "No!" he bellowed, and the sound was so raw it scraped the inside of Harry's bones. "No! Harry! Harry!" A curse cracked, and Hagrid choked off, but the grief in that one shout echoed through the trees. Harry's head lolled as they lifted him, his face pressed against rough fabric. Hagrid's coat. The smell of Hagrid, earth, animals, smoke, wrapped around him like home, and Harry nearly lost control. He bit the inside of his cheek hard enough to taste blood, held himself still. As Hagrid stumbled forward under the weight of Harry's body, as Death Eaters shoved and laughed, Harry James Potter listened to the forest behind them and the castle ahead. He listened to Tom Marvolo Riddle's triumph. And he lay there breathing in secret, while the world believed he was dead. They marched him back into Hogwarts like a trophy. Hagrid's arms shook under Harry James Potter's weight. Every step jarred Harry's bones, jolting him against Hagrid's chest. Harry felt Hagrid's breath coming in harsh sobs, felt the giant man's grief vibrating through him like thunder. The grounds were chaos. Bodies lay where they had fallen, some still moving, crawling toward help. A group of centaurs had formed a tight line near the edge of the forest, arrows drawn, faces grim. They did not fire. Not now. Not with giants and dementors and Death Eaters swarming. Somewhere a giant bellowed and the sound rolled across the night like an avalanche. Tom Marvolo Riddle walked ahead of them as if he were leading a parade. The Elder Wand was raised, catching firelight and moonlight. Voldemort's pale face was serene, almost beautiful in its cold perfection. The Death Eaters flanked him, laughing, shouting, calling out Harry Potter's name with mockery. Harry kept his eyes closed. He tasted smoke. He heard the crackle of flames. Somewhere in the castle, something collapsed with a roar, and the vibration shivered through the ground into Hagrid's boots. As they passed the shattered gates, Harry heard a sound that ripped him open. A woman's scream, high and broken, and he knew it was Molly Prewitt Weasley without needing to look. He heard Arthur Weasley's hoarse voice trying to calm her. He heard Ginevra Molly Weasley's sharp sob. The pain in those sounds was almost worse than death would have been. He felt Hagrid stumble. Hands shoved Hagrid forward, cruel, impatient. "Move, you great lump," someone snarled. Hagrid's voice came out in a broken growl. "Don't you touch him," he rasped. "Don't you?" A curse snapped, and Hagrid grunted, nearly falling. Harry's head lolled. He caught the edge of his own lips between his teeth, holding himself still. They entered the entrance hall, and the smell hit Harry. Burnt wood, spilled potion, blood. The marble floor was cracked in places, chunks gouged out by curses. Suits of armor lay scattered, limbs broken, helmets dented. The great stone staircase bore scorch marks like claw scratches. Voldemort's voice rose above the din. "Come," he called, and the word was a command that seemed to pull the castle along with it. "Come and see." The great hall doors stood half off their hinges. Light poured out, torchlight and spelllight and firelight, casting everything in a fevered glow. As Hagrid carried Harry through the doorway, the noise inside swelled into a wave. Sobs, gasps, curses, The scrape of benches dragged aside. Harry sensed bodies. So many bodies, crowded and bleeding and terrified. He felt the collective weight of grief crash down on him, and he nearly opened his eyes, nearly rose, nearly ruined everything because he couldn't bear it. He didn't. Hagrid lumbered forward, pushed by Death Eaters. Harry's body was laid down on the stone floor near the center aisle, and for a heartbeat Harry felt the cold seep into his back. He lay there still. He listened. Tom Marvolo Riddle stepped to the front of the hall, the Elder Wand held high, and his voice cut through the noise like a knife. "It is done," Voldemort said. "Harry Potter is dead." The cry that answered him was not a single sound, but a ripping, a fabric tearing. Harry heard Hermione Jean Granger's voice in that cry, and Ronald Bilious Weasley's, and Ginny's, and the sound of it nearly made Harry's lungs rebel. He kept still. Voldemort continued, voice smooth. "He died as he lived, foolish, arrogant, believing himself beyond my reach." A pause, a cruel savoring. "And now, you will lay down your wands. You will kneel. You will swear loyalty. Or you will die." A murmur rolled through the hall, rising into scattered defiance. Someone shouted, "Never!" Bellatrix Black Lestrange laughed, high and wild. "Look at them, my lord," she cried. "Look how they break." Harry lay on the floor and felt the stone under him, the cold seeping in. And he realized with a sick, clarifying shock that this was what Voldemort wanted more than anything. Not death, not even victory, but submission. The world kneeling. And Harry James Potter, alive beneath the weight of their grief, understood that he had left his friends in the darkest moment. Neville Longbottom stepped forward into the aisle like a man walking into a storm. Harry James Potter could not see him without opening his eyes, but he felt him, the shift in the room, the way hope flared in a crowd when someone refused to collapse. Neville's voice rang out, hoarse with smoke and shouting and injury. "You didn't win," Neville said, and the defiance in those 3 words snapped through the hall like lightning. A hiss of laughter rose from Death Eaters. Voldemort's voice was almost amused. "Did you not hear me?" he asked gently. "Harry Potter is dead." Neville's answer came sharp. "So what?" he barked. "You think that means we're going to do what you say? You think we're going to—" His voice cracked, then steadied. "We're going to keep fighting." Harry's chest tightened. He could imagine Neville's face, bruised, stubborn, bright with fury. Harry felt a savage pride, and with it an ache so deep it was almost physical. Voldemort's voice cooled. "Bravery," he murmured, "is often confused with stupidity." A movement rippled through the hall. Harry heard Minerva McGonagall's voice, raw and furious. "He's right," she shouted. "We do not." A curse cracked. Someone screamed. The sound jolted Harry's body, and he had to fight not to react. Voldemort spoke again, and now his voice carried command. "Seize him." Harry heard feet, the scrape of boots on stone. He heard Neville struggle, heard someone grunt with effort. And then Neville's voice rose again, ragged but unbroken. "You're going to have to kill me too," Neville shouted. A moment of silence, taut as a drawn bowstring. Voldemort's voice turned almost conversational. "Yes," he said. "I will." Harry's stomach dropped. Neville Longbottom could die right now in front of everyone, because Harry had chosen this path. But Voldemort didn't cast the killing curse. Not yet. He wanted theater. He wanted fear to ferment. "Bring him here," Voldemort said. Hands dragged Neville forward. Harry heard the scrape of Neville's shoes on stone, the grunt of exertion, the muffled sound of someone being shoved to their knees. Hermione Jean Granger's voice broke through, sharp and desperate. "Leave him alone," she screamed. "Leave him." Ron's voice, raw with fury. "Get off him!" Harry's fingers twitched against the stone. He could not bear this. He could not. Voldemort's voice rose, silky and deadly. "You will watch," he said. "You will learn." There was a rustle, a hat being lifted, placed. Harry realized with a sick twist what Voldemort was doing, because he remembered the story, the sorting hat, forced onto Neville's head. Voldemort mocking Hogwarts itself. "You have worn this hat," Voldemort said, voice loud enough for all to hear. "You have clung to your house, to your school, to your childish little traditions." A pause. "Let us see what your courage is worth." Harry could picture it. Neville kneeling, the hat shoved down, Death Eater's wands raised. Neville's hands clenched, perhaps already reaching for a sword that might appear if the magic of Gryffindor recognized his bravery. In canon, it had. The sword of Gryffindor had come. Neville had risen, and the snake had died, and everything had turned. Here, the air felt different. The hall was heavy with despair. Voldemort's victory sat like a weight on every shoulder. A crackle of fire rose. The smell of burning felt closer. Voldemort was lighting the hat on fire. Neville screamed, one raw sound of pain, and then, through it, a strangled, furious laugh, because Neville Longbottom was stubborn even in agony. Harry heard the sword of Gryffindor's metal ring as it hit stone. Brief, bright. It had appeared. A gasp went through the hall. For a heartbeat, Harry's heart leapt, wild with hope. The sword. Neville could, but Death Eaters were faster. They were ready. They had learned from every mistake. Hands grabbed the sword the instant it flashed into existence. There was a scuffle, a curse, Neville's grunt of pain as he was slammed down harder. Voldemort laughed softly. "Did you think," he said, "that I would allow you a hero's moment?" The sword was taken. Neville was hauled up, wandless, helpless. The hat burned on the floor, flames licking at the brim. Hogwarts' symbol turned to ash. Harry felt something in him go cold and sharp. This was the difference. Voldemort had learned. Voldemort had prepared. Voldemort had come to crush hope before it could rise. Voldemort's voice cut through the hall. "Now," he said, "you will kneel." Someone sobbed. Someone whispered a prayer. And somewhere, deep in the crowd, a murmur of resistance stirred. Not enough yet, not strong enough to break the cage closing around them. Harry James Potter lay on stone, alive, silent, and understood that the battle was tipping not because of spells, but because of belief. And belief was bleeding out. The moment broke like glass. A shout rose, McGonagall's voice, fierce and commanding, and then spells exploded across the hall. Benches splintered. The air filled with sparks and smoke. People surged, some charging forward, some scrambling back, panic colliding with defiance. Harry James Potter felt vibrations through the stone as bodies moved around him. Someone stepped near his head, heels skidding dangerously close. He stayed limp, his mind racing. This was it. The chaos. The only chance. He cracked his eyelids a sliver. The great hall was a storm. Torches guttered as smoke thickened. Flames crawled up a banner, turning Gryffindor's red into black. At the front, Tom Marvolo Riddle stood like a pillar in the madness, robes hanging still, eyes bright and cold, the elder wand carving arcs of lethal light. Minerva McGonagall fought near the center dais, her wand snapping, transfiguring tables into shields, turning shards of stone into screaming birds. Her face was grim, her posture upright despite the weight of grief. Bellatrix Black Lestrange danced through the battle like someone at a feast, laughing as curses flew. Her hair was wild, her eyes fevered, her mouth twisted with delight. She dueled Molly Prewitt Weasley near a shattered doorway, and Harry felt his stomach clench because that fight could only end in death. Around them, students and teachers clashed with Death Eaters. Spells collided. Bodies fell. The room echoed with cries and the crack of magic. Harry's gaze snapped to Neville Longbottom. Neville was on the floor, hatless, face contorted with pain, hands pinned. A Death Eater stood over him with a wand to his throat. The sword of Gryffindor, gleaming, beautiful, was in another Death Eater's hands, already being passed backward, away from hope. Nagini was not here. Harry's eyes darted. No shimmering sphere, no glittering coils. Voldemort had not brought his snake into the hall. Voldemort had learned. Voldemort had kept his last Horcrux away from the one person brave enough to kill it. Harry's mouth went dry. The plan, his sacrifice, had been meant to give them a chance. It had. They were fighting. They were defying. But the fight was breaking into pieces. Without a clear turn, without the shock of Harry's return, without the collapse of Voldemort's certainty, the defenders were being swallowed by chaos and exhaustion. Someone fell near Harry's feet. A student, Ravenclaw, judging by the scarf, hit the floor hard, eyes staring. Harry flinched, then forced stillness again. Voldemort's voice rose above the din, amplified by magic. "Stop!" he commanded. The word should have silenced them. It should have frozen the room. It didn't. Harry blinked. He saw Voldemort's expression shift, not into anger, not yet, but into something sharp and wary. His spell had not held the room. Whether it was Harry's sacrifice weakening Voldemort's magic or simply the momentum of battle, the effect was the same. Voldemort was not controlling this moment as cleanly as he wanted. Voldemort's eyes flicked across the hall, and for a sick heartbeat, Harry thought Voldemort might look down and see the tiny movement of Harry's lashes, the faint rise of Harry's chest. Harry forced his body to go slack again. A curse slammed into Voldemort's shield and ricocheted, hitting a Death Eater near the wall. Voldemort's head snapped toward the attacker, and his focus shifted. He raised the Elder Wand and flung a spell that sent a line of defenders sprawling like puppets cut from strings. Harry's ears rang. The air was full of screams. Someone grabbed the edge of the stone floor near Harry and hauled themselves up, sobbing. Harry saw Hermione Jean Granger for a split second through the smoke, her face streaked with grime, her eyes wide and wet. She was looking at Harry's body. No. Harry's chest tightened so hard he thought he might crack. Hermione moved toward him, pushing through chaos. Ron was with her, his face twisted in agony, his wand trembling. They were coming. They were going to kneel by him. They were going to touch him. They were going to know. And if they knew, they would react. They would scream. They would ruin the secret. Tom Marvolo Riddle would see. Harry couldn't let them. He needed to get away now, before love betrayed him. He waited, breath held, until a bench exploded nearby, showering the floor with splinters. Hermione flinched back instinctively. Ron swore and grabbed her arm. Their eyes snapped away from Harry for one heartbeat. Harry moved. It was a tiny motion, so small it felt like betrayal. His fingers curled against the stone. He rolled his shoulder, inching his body toward the shadow beneath a toppled bench. Pain flared in his ribs. He bit back a gasp. He slid into the shadow, half hidden by broken wood and fallen cloth. Smoke curled low to the ground, masking movement. People surged past, too busy fighting and dying to notice a corpse shifting. Harry pulled his wand from where it lay against his body. His fingers were clumsy. He whispered, barely moving his lips. Disillusionment. The magic settled over him like a film of cold water. His skin blurred, taking on the mottled colors of stone and shadow. It wasn't perfect. He wasn't invisible. But in this chaos, imperfect was enough. Harry James Potter pressed himself flat and began to crawl. Slow, deliberate, moving only when noise and smoke covered him. He slid past a fallen banner. He slid past a boot that belonged to a Death Eater kicking at a student. He slid past a puddle of blood that reflected torchlight like liquid ruby. A hand brushed his ankle. Harry froze. It was a woman's hand. Molly Prewed Wesley, scrabbling for balance as she staggered back from Bellatrix's curse. Molly's fingers tightened reflexively, gripping the air where Harry's ankle had been. Molly looked down, confusion flickering, and then her eyes snapped up, returning to the duel, returning to survival. Harry crawled on. He reached the side doorway, half blocked by rubble. He squeezed through, ribs screaming, and slipped into the corridor beyond. Behind him, the great hall roared. Tom Marvolo Riddle was winning, and Harry James Potter, alive and unseen, fled his own death like a thief. Hermione Jean Granger saw the space where Harry James Potter's body had been, and felt the world tilt. One moment the stone floor held him, pale and still, hair matted with leaves, glasses askew. The next moment smoke surged, bodies moved. And when her eyes found that place again, there was only broken wood and blood, and the banner half burned. Her heart stopped. Her lungs forgot how to work. "Ron?" she choked, clawing at Ronald Bilious Weasley's sleeve with shaking fingers. He was. Ron's face had been carved into a mask of grief, so hard Hermione couldn't read it, and now it cracked. His eyes went wide, wild. "What?" he rasped. "Hermione, what do you mean?" "He's not there," Hermione said, and the words tasted insane. He was there, and now. Ron spun, scanning the floor like an animal. "Harry!" he shouted, and his voice broke on the name. Someone shoved into them, nearly knocking Hermione down. Percy Ignatius Weasley grabbed her elbow and hauled her back, his face streaked with blood and sweat. "Move!" Percy shouted over the din. "They're pushing us, move!" Hermione tore her gaze across the chaos, frantic. There, Voldemort, raised on the dais like a nightmare. There, McGonagall fighting. There, Bellatrix laughing. There, Molly and Arthur and Ginny, and too many bodies, too much noise. No sign of Harry. Ron tried to lunge forward again toward the space where Harry should have been. Percy yanked him back with surprising strength. "Ron!" Percy barked. "If you go back in there, you'll die. You hear me? We have to." "I don't care," Ron screamed, voice raw with grief and fury. He's. Hermione's mind raced, cold logic slamming into panic. If Harry's body was gone, there were only possibilities. Death Eaters had taken him. Why? To display. To burn? To desecrate? Or, impossible, stupid, desperate, he wasn't dead. Her hands shook. "Ron?" she said, forcing the word out, forcing herself to be heard. "Listen to me." Ron's eyes snapped to hers. They were red-rimmed, feral. "Harry left us," Hermione said, voice trembling. "And he wouldn't. Her throat closed. She swallowed hard. He wouldn't vanish without a reason." Ron's breath hitched. "Are you saying?" Hermione didn't dare finish. "Not here. Not with Death Eater's spells flashing like knives around them. Not with Voldemort's attention sweeping the room." Percy shoved them toward a side corridor. "McGonagall's ordering retreat," he shouted. "They're trying to get the younger ones out through passages. Come on." Hermione stumbled, clutching her wand. Ron's hand found hers, crushed her fingers, and she felt him shaking. He kept glancing back as if the corridor behind them might spit Harry out like a miracle. The great hall's noise faded slightly as they ran. Hermione's thoughts raced. If Harry was alive, he couldn't reveal it now. Not if Voldemort was still standing. Not if Nagini was still somewhere safe. Not if the Elder Wand still sat in Voldemort's hand. Hermione's stomach twisted. She had seen Harry's face. She had heard Hagrid's grief. She had watched Voldemort declare him dead. And yet the stone where Harry had lain was now empty. They ran past a portrait that was on fire, the painted witch screaming as she flung herself out of frame. They ran past a window shattered open to the night, wind whipping in, carrying the smell of burning wood and the distant, horrible laughter of giants. Ron whispered Harry's name under his breath like a prayer and a curse. Hermione didn't answer. She couldn't. She didn't know whether hope would save them or break them. All she knew was that the castle was falling. The corridor ahead was full of fleeing children. And somewhere, somehow, Harry James Potter was no longer where he should have been. Harry James Potter moved through Hogwarts like someone swimming through a collapsing ship. He kept to narrow corridors, hugging walls, stepping over rubble, slipping through gaps where only desperation could fit. The disillusionment charm clung to him like a dying skin, blurring him into stone and shadow. Twice it wavered when pain spiked in his ribs. He forced breath into his lungs slowly, quietly. He passed a classroom with its door ripped off. Inside, bodies lay sprawled across desks as if they had simply fallen asleep during a lecture. A small hand hung over the edge, fingers curled. Harry's stomach clenched and he nearly retched. He kept going. The secret passage behind Ariana Dumbledore's portrait was where he remembered it. Behind the moving canvas, a gap in the wall that smelled of damp stone and old secrets. He slipped inside and let the darkness swallow him. The passage was cramped, the air stale. The stone pressed close. His shoulders scraped the wall. He stumbled, catching himself with a hand that came away gritty with dust. He could hear the castle behind him, muffled shouts, the crack of spells, the distant roar of something huge. He could hear, too, the strange stillness beneath it, Hogwarts itself holding on, refusing to crumble entirely, as if stubbornness could be architecture. The passage bent and narrowed. Harry's breath came shallow. He kept moving, one foot in front of the other, because stopping felt like dying. Then, faintly, he smelled something that wasn't smoke. Beer. Goat. The passage opened. Warmth hit him, thick with the smell of ale and damp wool. Candlelight flickered. Rough wooden tables filled the room. Faces turned, pale, shocked, exhausted. Refugees clustered together, some with bloody bandages, some with wands clutched like lifelines. The low hum of fear filled the air. The Hog's Head. Aberforth Dumbledore was behind the bar, his beard gray and unkempt, his eyes sharp. He looked up, and for a heartbeat he stared as if he'd seen a ghost. Harry's disillusionment charm slipped as exhaustion punched through him. His body turned visible in the candlelight, dirt-streaked, shaking, too pale. Aberforth's eyes widened. He moved fast, surprisingly fast for an old man, vaulting the bar and grabbing Harry before his knees hit the floor. Merlins. Aberforth snarled, hauling Harry into the shadow near the wall. Boy? Harry tried to speak. His throat was raw. He rasped. I'm alive. Aberforth's grip tightened until it hurt. I can see that, he snapped. His eyes were furious, not at Harry, but at the world. What in the name of all that's filthy are you doing here? They said you were dead. The whole bloody castle thinks you're... I have to stay dead, Harry whispered, and the words tasted like ash. Aberforth froze. His eyes narrowed, evaluating, calculating. He looked older than Harry remembered, more like a man carved out of stubborn anger. You're telling me, Aberforth said slowly, that you walked into Tom Riddle's arms, let him hit you with a killing curse, and then you crawled back here to hide. Harry flinched at the name. He didn't. Harry swallowed. He thought. Aberforth's face twisted with contempt. Dying as a strategy, he muttered. Albus would have liked that. Noble, dramatic, stupid. Harry's throat tightened at the mention of Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore. It wasn't for him, Harry said hoarsely. It was the only way. Aberforth's gaze sharpened. He leaned in close, voice low, harsh. Did it work? He demanded. Is Tom dead? Harry shook his head. The motion made his ribs scream. No, he whispered. Nagini is still alive. The last Horcrux. Voldemort, Tom Marvolo Riddle. He kept her away. Aberforth swore under his breath, a string of words that made a nearby refugee flinch. He pressed Harry harder against the wall as if anchoring him. Then you haven't ended anything, Aberforth said, voice rough. You've just made the world think the only person who ever had a chance is dead. Harry's eyes burned. I know. Aberforth stared at him for a long moment. Something in his expression shifted, very slightly. Less contempt, more grim understanding. "Albus sent you to die," Aberforth said, not as a question. Harry's breath hitched. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. Aberforth exhaled hard through his nose. "I hated my brother," he said quietly, voice edged with old pain. "I hated his plans, his secrets, his damn belief that people were chess pieces." He looked at Harry, and his eyes were suddenly very tired. "But he cared in his way, and he chose you, didn't he? Because you were the kind of boy who'd walk into death if it meant someone else lived." Harry swallowed. "People are dying anyway," he whispered. Aberforth's jaw clenched. "They're dying because Tom Riddle is winning," he said. "And you, boy, are bleeding in my pub while the castle burns." A noise rose from the room. Shouts. Someone bursting in through the front door, drenched in rain, screaming that Death Eaters were sweeping the village. Aberforth's head snapped up. His hand tightened on Harry's shoulder. "You stay back," he growled. "If anyone sees you, if word gets out, Tom Riddle will tear this world apart looking for you." Harry's heart hammered. He looked toward the crowd, toward the door, toward the smoke-stained windows. He thought of Hermione, Ron.E, Ginny, Neville, McGonagall. He thought of the Great Hall. He swallowed the urge to run back into the fire. "I won't be seen," Harry whispered. Aberforth's eyes were hard. "You'd better not," he said. "Because if you're alive, boy, then hope is alive. And hope is dangerous." He shoved Harry toward a narrow door behind the bar. "Back room," he snarled. "Now." Harry stumbled into the shadows, and the door shut behind him. The hogshead's noise muffled, leaving Harry alone with his breathing and the taste of smoke. Outside, Hogwarts burned, and Harry James Potter, alive and hidden, listened to the world falling apart. Hermione Jean Granger entered the hogshead like someone walking into the wrong dream. The room was crammed with bodies, students with wide eyes, professors with torn robes, parents clutching children. The air was thick with sweat and wet wool, the smell of fear a living thing. Candlelight made everyone look half-starved, faces hollowed by smoke and grief. Ronald Bilious Weasley pushed in beside her, shoulders hunched, wand clenched. His eyes were wild, scanning the room as if he expected Voldemort to step out from behind a table. He looked like he'd aged years in the last hour. "Aberforth," Hermione shouted, voice ragged. Where are they?" Aberforth Dumbledore stood behind the bar like a barricade, his arms folded, his face carved into suspicion. "Who's they?" he snapped. Hermione's throat tightened. "Harry," she said. The name came out like a wound. He's gone." The room around them shifted, the word rippling. People turned. Some gasped. Some made choking sounds. Hermione saw a girl, first year maybe, clap a hand to her mouth and start to cry. Ron stepped forward, voice shaking. "We saw him," Ron said, and the words sounded impossible. "We saw him on the floor. And then, he wasn't. They might have taken him." Aberforth's eyes narrowed. "Taken him," he repeated, and there was something dangerous in his tone. "If Tom Riddle's taken him, you're all dead anyway. Might as well drink and wait." Hermione's fury flared, sharp enough to cut through grief. "Don't you dare," she hissed. "Don't you dare talk about him like." A crash from the door cut her off. Another group stumbled in, soaked, pale. Minerva McGonagall entered last, her posture rigid with stubborn will despite the blood on her sleeve. Her face was gray, her eyes blazing. McGonagall's gaze swept the room. It caught Hermione's, Ron's. Her expression tightened, grief and command colliding. "How many?" McGonagall asked, voice hoarse. Hermione opened her mouth, but no number came. The dead had become a blur. Fred Gideon Weasley's empty eyes, Remus Lupin's stillness, Nymphadora Tonks's limp hair, bodies she hadn't even recognized. Ron's jaw worked. "Too many," he said, voice breaking. McGonagall closed her eyes for a heartbeat, then opened them again, and Hermione saw the steel in her, the refusal to collapse. "Hogwarts has fallen," McGonagall said, voice quiet but carrying. The room went still. "The Death Eaters hold the Great Hall. They are sweeping the grounds. Anyone still inside is either captured or dead." A sob rose. Someone whispered a prayer. Hermione felt the world go cold. Ron grabbed Hermione's arm hard. "Harry," he whispered. "We have to." Hermione's mind raced. The empty space where Harry's body had been. The impossibility of it. The whisper of hope that had felt like insanity. She looked at McGonagall. "Professor," Hermione said, voice trembling. "Harry, he was dead. Voldemort said he killed him. And then he was gone." "Nani? McGonagall stared at her, eyes narrowing. For a long moment the only sound was rain dripping from cloaks onto the wooden floor. Then McGonagall's mouth tightened. "Gone," she repeated softly, as if tasting the word. Aberforth made a harsh sound. He leaned forward over the bar, his eyes flicking over Hermione and Ron with the same suspicion he'd shown Harry. "You didn't see him walk," Aberforth said. "You didn't see him breathe." "No," Hermione whispered. "But she swallowed. "But I don't think he'd be taken. Not like that. Nah." "What? Oh. Not without fighting. Nah." "Did he?" Ron's eyes were bright with desperate hope. "Unless he wasn't dead," Ron said, and his voice cracked on the possibility. The room held its breath. Aberforth's face went flat. "If you say that out loud again," he snarled quietly, "I'll stun you myself. Do you understand me? The walls have ears. The village has ears. Tom Riddle's people are everywhere." Hermione's heart hammered. She stepped closer to the bar, lowering her voice. "Aberforth," she said, forcing calm into the words. "If Harry is alive, we need to know. We need to help him." Aberforth's eyes flashed. "Help him," he hissed. "You think you can help him? You children have been running through war like it's a school prank." Ron's face flushed, rage sparking. "Don't call us," Ron began. McGonagall cut in, voice sharp. "Enough." She looked at Aberforth, and Hermione saw the strange familiarity in their shared grief. "If Potter is alive, hiding is his only chance. The Death Eaters will not rest. The Ministry will fall by dawn. You will not speak of it." Hermione's throat tightened. "But—" McGonagall's gaze softened for a fraction, and it nearly undid Hermione. "Miss Granger," McGonagall said quietly, "there are moments when silence is not cowardice. It is strategy." Ron stared at McGonagall as if she had spoken blasphemy. "We're supposed to just— what? Run away?" McGonagall's expression hardened. "You are supposed to live," she said, "so that there are people left to fight tomorrow." Tomorrow. Hermione tasted the word like ash. Aberforth's hand gripped the bar. He looked from McGonagall to Hermione to Ron, and something in his eyes shifted. Reluctant acceptance, perhaps, or the grim knowledge that the children in front of him were already carved by war. "Back room," Aberforth growled suddenly. "You two, now." Ron stiffened. "Why?" Aberforth leaned in, voice low enough that only Hermione and Ron could hear. "Because if he's alive, he's there," Aberforth said, each word a knife. "And if you scream, I will hex you into the next century." Hermione's breath caught so hard it hurt. Ron's face went white. They moved, fast, stumbling, pushing past refugees. Hermione's hands shook as she reached for the door behind the bar. Her heart hammered so hard she thought it might be heard across the room. She opened it, and the world shifted. Harry James Potter was sitting on a crate in the Hog's Head back room when Hermione Jean Granger and Ronald Bilious Weasley found him. For a heartbeat, none of them moved. Hermione's mind couldn't fit the image into reality. Harry was there, alive, shoulders slumped, hair filthy, eyes too bright and a face gone sharp with exhaustion. His glasses were cracked. There was dried blood at the corner of his mouth. He looked like someone who had crawled out of a grave. And yet, he was breathing. Hermione made a sound, half sob, half laugh. And then she was moving, stumbling forward. Ron moved too, faster. And for a second Hermione thought he might punch Harry out of sheer fury and relief. Ron didn't. He grabbed Harry by the shoulders and hauled him off the crate into a crushing embrace that shook all three of them. "You!" Ron choked, voice breaking. You! Harry's arms came up slowly, as if he couldn't believe he was allowed to hold them. His fingers dug into Ron's back. Hermione pressed her face into Harry's shoulder and inhaled him. Smoke, dirt, sweat, and the familiar warmth of him that made her knees go weak. Harry's voice was hoarse. "I'm sorry," he whispered into Ron's hair. "I'm so sorry." Ron's hands tightened. "Don't," Ron rasped. "Don't you dare apologize. Just," Ron swallowed hard. "Just don't you ever do that again." Hermione pulled back enough to look at Harry's face. Tears blurred her vision. She reached up and cupped Harry's cheek with trembling fingers, as if touching him would confirm he was real. "How?" she whispered. "Harry, how?" Harry's eyes flicked to hers, and Hermione saw a grief so deep it scared her. "He cast the killing curse," Harry said softly. It hit me." His voice faltered. "But it didn't take me. Not all of me. It took what was inside." Hermione's stomach dropped. "The Horcrux," she breathed. Harry nodded, swallowing hard. "It's gone," he whispered. "I'm not." He stopped, as if he couldn't say it. "But Nagini is still alive." Ron's face twisted with fury. "Where is she?" he demanded. "We'll go back. We'll—" "No," Harry said sharply, and the single word cut through Ron like a slap. Harry's voice softened immediately, because Harry hated hurting Ron, hated commanding. "No?" he repeated, lower. "Not now. Hogwarts it's gone." Hermione's throat closed. She thought of the Great Hall, of fire and bodies, of McGonagall's quiet voice saying Hogwarts had fallen. She swallowed hard. "What happened?" she whispered. Harry's eyes went distant, and Hermione saw him back in the forest, back under green light. "Narcissa Malfoy," Harry said. "She checked me. She knew I was alive. She lied. She said I was dead." Ron blinked, disbelief cutting through grief. "Malfoy's mum saved you." Harry's mouth twisted. "She saved Draco," he said. "I just happened to be useful." Hermione's mind spun. "Then Voldemort thinks." "He thinks I'm dead," Harry said. "And we need him to keep thinking it." Ron pulled back, anger flaring. "Why?" he demanded. "If you're alive, we can fight. We can." Harry's eyes flashed, suddenly fierce. "Because he's still standing," Harry hissed. "Because he won the Great Hall. Because he's got the Ministry by the throat. Because if he knows I'm alive, he'll stop caring about the castle and start hunting. He'll burn the whole country down to find me." Ron's face crumpled, helpless fury and fear colliding. "So what?" Ron whispered. "We just hide? We let him—" Harry's expression broke. "I didn't want this," he whispered, and the vulnerability in his voice made Hermione's chest ache. "I thought," he swallowed hard, "I thought it would turn. I thought if I did it, if I died, it would give you enough time." "Enough." Hermione shook her head, tears sliding down her face. "You did give us a chance," she whispered. We weren't enough," Ron said, voice cracking, and Hermione saw his grief twist into something like self-hatred. Harry's hands tightened into fists. "It's not about enough," he said, forcing steadiness into his voice. "It's about what comes next." He looked between them, and Hermione felt the weight of his gaze like a mantle. We're not done. Ron wiped his face hard with his sleeve. McGonagall says the Ministry will fall by dawn, Ron said, voice rough. Harry's jaw tightened. Then we don't have dawn, Harry said. We have tonight. Hermione's mind raced, already assembling plans from fragments. We need to disappear, she said, voice shaking with urgency. We need safe houses, wards, communication. Harry nodded. And we need Nagini, he said quietly. Because as long as she's alive, Voldemort can't die. Ron stared at him, eyes haunted. And if she's dead, Ron whispered, then we can kill him. Harry's mouth tightened. Then someone can, he said. Hermione reached out and grabbed Harry's hand, interlacing their fingers. His skin was cold. She squeezed hard, grounding him. You're not dying again, Hermione said fiercely. Harry looked at her, and for a moment the boy in him, 18, exhausted, terrified, showed through. I might, he whispered. Hermione's eyes burned. Then we'll make it mean something, she whispered back. But you're not doing it alone. Ron swallowed hard and nodded once, sharply, as if sealing a vow. Not alone, Ron said. Harry's shoulders sagged, and for a heartbeat Hermione saw relief flicker, fragile as a candle flame. He squeezed their hands. In the room beyond, the Hogs had murmured with refugees' grief. Outside, rain hammered Hogsmeade's streets. Hogwarts burned on the hill like a wound. And in a dim back room, 3 teenagers held each other as if holding on could keep the world from tipping into darkness. While Harry James Potter hid in a pub's back room, Tom Marvolo Riddle turned Hogwarts into a throne room. He did not sit in the Great Hall. The hall was too public, too chaotic, still humming with the residue of battle and defiance. Voldemort moved instead to the Headmaster's office, claiming it the way one claimed a conquered keep, by walking in and expecting the castle to agree. The portraits trembled when he entered. Some pretended sleep. Some watched with wide, fearful eyes. The empty phoenix perch seemed to mock him, a quiet reminder that certain kinds of loyalty could not be forced. Voldemort lifted the Elder Wand and snapped a spell. The wards that had been layered through the office for centuries buckled and fell. The air shifted, the way it did when ancient magic surrendered under a new, brutal hand. He turned to his followers and found them waiting like dogs for scraps. Lucius Malfoy knelt at once, pale and shaking, his hair damp with sweat. "My lord," he whispered. Voldemort's red eyes slid over him. Lucius smelled of fear and expensive cologne, and the faint desperation of a man who knew he had bet on the wrong kind of immortality. "You were very eager," Voldemort said softly, "to present me with my victory." Lucius's mouth opened, closed. "You're right," he stammered. Voldemort's fingers tightened on the Elder Wand. "Is it?" he asked, voice light. Lucius flinched as if struck. Voldemort watched him with the detached interest of someone studying a bug beneath glass. Lucius Malfoy had once been useful. Now Lucius was only a reminder. Fear made people faithful, but it also made them weak. Yaxley stood behind Lucius, posture stiff. Beside him, Pious Thickness stood with eyes too blank, too obedient, imperious or simply broken by months of control. In Thickness's hands was a parchment bearing the Ministry's seal, ink still wet. "It is done," Yaxley said, voice careful. "The Ministry will announce the transition. The Wisengamot will convene to kneel," Voldemort murmured. And the word ended the sentence. Yaxley swallowed. "Yes, my lord." Voldemort reached out and took the parchment without looking at it. He didn't need to. The Ministry was a house built on rules and fear. Once you owned the fear, the rules came with it. He held the seal between two pale fingers and crushed it. Wax cracked. "There will be order," Voldemort said, voice smooth. "There will be purity. There will be quiet." Lucius's shoulders sagged with relief at the word order, as if he could pretend this was politics instead of tyranny. Voldemort watched that relief and felt contempt. "And Harry Potter?" "Bellatrix," Black Lestrange asked, voice trembling with hunger. "My lord, his body, shall we?" Voldemort's gaze flicked, sharp. "Leave it," he said. Bellatrix's mouth fell open slightly. "Bah. Bah." Voldemort turned slowly, and the room chilled. "I said," he repeated softly. "Leave it." Bellatrix shivered, then bowed deeply, murmuring devotion. "As you wish, my lord." Voldemort moved to the window and looked out across the grounds. Hogwarts smoldered beneath the dark mark. Giants stomped among fallen stones. Death Eaters dragged captives into lines. The castle, once a bastion of defiance, now looked like a conquered fortress. He should have been satisfied. He was, in a way. But beneath satisfaction was a thin, sharp thread of irritation. The killing curse had been clean. He had watched it hit Harry Potter. He had watched the boy fall. And yet, there had been a sensation, a faint wrongness in the Elder Wand's recoil, like a blade meeting bone when it expected flesh. The wand had obeyed. The wand had cast. But it had not felt triumphant. Voldemort's fingers tightened. He hated that feeling. He hated the idea that any object, anything, could resist him. "Send scouts," he said abruptly. "Search the grounds. Search the tunnels. I want every passage sealed. Every village watched. Every road." "Name." Yaxley bowed. "Yes, my lord." Lucius dared lift his head, eyes flicking up. "My lord," he whispered, voice trembling. "Harry Potter is dead." Voldemort's eyes slid to him. "Yes," Voldemort said softly. "He is." Lucius exhaled, relief trembling through him. Voldemort watched the relief and felt nothing but cold satisfaction at the power to grant and revoke it. He turned away from the window. "And now," Voldemort said, voice low, "we will cleanse what remains." Behind him the portraits watched. The castle listened. Somewhere deep within Hogwarts, old magic curled and resisted, like a beast forced into a cage. And in a back room in Hogsmeade, Harry James Potter breathed quietly. A secret that would ruin everything if it escaped. Minerva McGonagall did not collapse. She sat at a rough table in the hogshead with her back straight, her wand laid beside her like a knife. Blood seeped through the sleeve of her robe. Someone had tried to bandage it. The cloth was already pink. Around her, the pub murmured. Low voices, sobs, the clink of cups. The surviving fragments of Hogwarts gathered here like embers swept into a jar, still glowing, still dangerous. Aberforth Dumbledore stood across from her, arms folded, eyes narrowed. He looked like someone who had expected the world to end and was now irritated to find it continuing. Hermione Jean Granger and Ronald Bilious Weasley hovered near the table, faces tight, trying not to look toward the back room where Harry James Potter sat hidden. Hermione's mind was still buzzing with the shock of Harry's survival. She kept expecting the room to dissolve, to reveal that she had imagined him because grief had turned her mind cruel. But the reality of him, alive, was there, pressing against her ribs like a second heartbeat. McGonagall looked at Hermione and Ron with eyes that had seen too much tonight. "We have little time," she said. Hermione nodded, forcing herself into clarity. "The Ministry," she said. "Yaxley, thickness, if Voldemort controls it openly." "He will," McGonagall said. "Kingsley Shacklebolt is—" She stopped. The words did not want to come. Hermione saw McGonagall's mouth tighten, saw the moment she swallowed grief. "Kingsley is gone," McGonagall finished, voice flat. Ron's face twisted. Hermione's throat burned. McGonagall continued, voice hard. "The Auror Office will be purged. Flu connections will be monitored. Apparition points in London will be watched. Any Order members not already dead will be hunted." "Nay." Hermione's mind raced, assembling a picture of their world tightening like a noose. "We can't stay here," Ron said, voice rough. "They'll come." Aberforth grunted. "Already are," he muttered. "I've got people watching the street. Snatchers. Death Eaters. They'll sweep the village by dawn." McGonagall's gaze sharpened. "Then we leave before dawn," she said. Hermione's fingers tightened around her wand. "Where?" she asked, because planning without a destination felt like drowning. McGonagall hesitated, and Hermione saw the pain beneath the command. Hogwarts had been their stronghold, their home, their headquarters. Without it, the world felt exposed. "There are safe houses," McGonagall said finally. "Some wards older than the Ministry itself, but many are compromised. The order is broken." Hermione swallowed hard. "And Harry," she whispered, though she hated the way saying his name felt like lighting a flare in the dark. McGonagall's gaze flicked toward the back room door, and Hermione saw something complicated there. Hope, fear, the awareness of what Harry represented. "Harry Potter must remain dead," McGonagall said softly. Ron flinched. "He's alive!" Ron snapped, anger flashing. "How can you—" McGonagall's eyes hardened. "Because he is more valuable alive than dead," she said. "And he will be far less alive if Tom Riddle knows he breathes." Hermione felt sick. She understood. She hated that she understood. Aberforth shifted, leaning closer, voice low. "You're keeping him like a secret weapon," he muttered to McGonagall. Albus would have approved. McGonagall's jaw clenched. "I'm keeping him like a human being who deserves a chance," she said sharply. "Which is more than your brother ever gave him." A silence dropped over the table, thick with old grief and anger. Hermione swallowed and forced herself to speak. "Nagini," she said, voice tight. "Harry says she's still alive." McGonagall's face tightened. "Then Voldemort is not yet mortal," she said. Ron's voice broke. "So everything we did," he began, then stopped, unable to finish. Hermione reached across the table and squeezed Ron's hand hard. Her eyes stung. "It still matters," she whispered fiercely. "It has to." McGonagall nodded slowly. "Every Horcrux destroyed is a chain cut," she said. "But until Nagini is dead, he cannot be killed. And without Hogwarts, killing the snake becomes complicated." Aberforth snorted. "Complicated," he repeated, contemptuous. "It's bloody impossible. That snake will be wrapped in protections thick as stone." Hermione's mind churned. "We need information," she said. "Where she is. How she's protected. Who guards her." "Da." McGonagall's gaze sharpened. "Yes," she said. "And we need to keep the remaining students alive. We need to smuggle them out, hide them, shield them." Her voice softened slightly. "We need to keep our children from becoming prisoners in their own country." Ron's jaw clenched. "And Harry?" he asked again, quieter now. "What does he do?" McGonagall looked down at the table, at the rough map Aberforth had sketched with a stub of charcoal. Roads, woods, the village, the castle on the hill like a wound. She lifted her gaze, and Hermione saw the truth in it. "Harry Potter will do what he has always done," McGonagall said softly. "He will carry the weight of all our hopes and hate himself for it." Hermione's breath caught. McGonagall's voice hardened. "But he will not do it alone," she added, and her gaze pinned Hermione and Ron. "Not if you value him. Not if you value the future." Hermione nodded, tears threatening. Ron nodded too, his face grim. Outside, rain kept falling, relentless, washing ash from the air in slow, useless streams. Inside, the survivors drew lines on paper and tried to plan a way to fight a war that had just turned into something darker: occupation. In Hogwarts, Draco Lucius Malfoy sat on the floor of a corridor that smelled of smoke and fear and spilled ink. His hands were shaking. He stared at them as if they belonged to someone else. His left sleeve was torn, showing a bruise blooming dark on his forearm. His hair was plastered to his forehead with sweat. He could hear distant screams, distant laughter. Every sound made him flinch. Narcissa Black Malfoy knelt in front of him, her hands cupping his face. Her eyes were red. Her composure, usually so perfect it could cut glass, had cracked. "You're alive," she whispered, and her voice was the sound of someone who had been holding their breath for hours and had finally been allowed air. Draco's throat worked. "Of course I'm alive," he said, but the words were thin, brittle, and he hated himself for the weakness in them. Narcissa's fingers trembled against his cheek. "I asked him," she whispered. "In the forest? I asked, and he told me." Draco's breath hitched. "You?" He swallowed hard. "You went near him?" Narcissa's eyes flickered. "I did what I had to," she said softly. And Draco saw something fierce in her, something he hadn't realized she could be. "And then I lied." Draco stared. "You lied to him?" Narcissa's mouth tightened. "Yes," she said. "I told him Harry Potter was dead." Draco's stomach dropped. The corridor seemed to tilt. "But Harry Potter," he began, and then stopped because the thought was too dangerous to shape. Narcissa's gaze darted down the corridor, sharp with paranoia. She whispered. "Not here. Not ever." Draco's mind raced, panic rising. "Why would you?" He hissed, then lowered his voice, swallowing the sound. "Why would you risk it?" Narcissa looked at him as if the answer were obvious. "Because I had to know you were alive," she said, voice raw. "Because if Harry Potter could tell me, then perhaps there is still a future where you do not belong to him." She didn't say Voldemort's name. She didn't need to. Draco's mouth went dry. He thought of the Dark Lord's pale face, of those red eyes that saw through skin and bone, and found only fear. Draco thought of the way the Dark Lord's hand had closed around Draco's shoulder earlier, not gentle, not truly, but possessive. "A future," Draco whispered, and the word felt like a joke. Narcissa's fingers tightened. "Listen to me," she said fiercely. "You must do whatever he asks. You must survive. Do you understand?" Draco wanted to scream. He wanted to say he was tired of surviving. He wanted to say that the cost of it was too high. But he saw his mother's face, white, desperate, brave in a way Draco had never been, and he swallowed the scream. He nodded once. Footsteps echoed at the far end of the corridor. Narcissa's hands fell from Draco's face. Her posture straightened with practiced speed. Draco scrambled to his feet, stomach twisting because he knew those footsteps. He knew the rhythm of them, measured, patient, inevitable. Tom Marvolo Riddle rounded the corner, the Elder Wand in his hand, robes flowing like shadow. Behind him moved two Death Eaters, silent. Draco felt cold spread through his chest. Voldemort's gaze swept over Narcissa and Draco. He smiled faintly. "There you are," he said, voice mild. "I was told you had been separated." Narcissa dipped her head. "My lord," she murmured, voice perfectly controlled. Draco stared in awe at how she could do it, how she could put steel over terror like a mask. Voldemort's gaze lingered on Draco. "Draco," he said softly, "you have served adequately." Draco's throat tightened. He forced himself to bow his head. "Thank you, my lord," he whispered, though the words tasted like bile. Voldemort stepped closer, and Draco's skin crawled. Voldemort's pale fingers lifted Draco's chin, forcing him to look up. Draco met those red eyes and felt himself shrink. "You will be useful," Voldemort murmured. "In the new world." Draco swallowed hard. "Yes, my lord." Voldemort's fingers released Draco's chin. His gaze slid back to Narcissa, and for a heartbeat Draco saw something like amusement flicker. "You are loyal," Voldemort said softly, and Narcissa's face did not change. "Yes, my lord," Narcissa whispered. Voldemort's smile widened a fraction. "Good," he said. "Loyalty is rewarded." He turned away, robes whispering, and moved down the corridor, his followers trailing. Draco watched him go, heart hammering. When Voldemort's footsteps faded, Draco exhaled a breath he hadn't known he held. His knees threatened to buckle. Narcissa's hand found Draco's, gripping hard. Her fingers were cold. "We live," she whispered, and there was no joy in it, only determination. Draco looked down the corridor where Voldemort had vanished. Somewhere in Hogwarts, prisoners were being chained. Somewhere in the castle's depths, plans were being written in blood. And somewhere, Harry James Potter was alive, and Narcissa's lie hung between worlds like a blade. They left before dawn. The rain had turned Hogsmeade streets into rivers of mud, and the darkness clung close, heavy with the smell of smoke carried from the hill. The castle was still burning, a wounded glow behind clouds. The dark mark floated above it, pale and patient, like a warning carved into the sky. Harry James Potter pulled Aberforth's old cloak tighter around himself. The fabric was coarse, smelling of ale and goat and stubbornness. It wasn't the invisibility cloak. It wasn't protection. But it was something that wasn't his, and that helped. It made him feel less like the boy everyone would hunt. Hermione Granger walked on his left, hood up, wand in her hand, eyes scanning shadows. She moved like someone who had decided fear would not stop her, only sharpen her. Ronald Bilious Weasley walked on Harry's right, shoulders hunched against Rain, jaw clenched so tight Hermione could see the muscle jumping. Minerva McGonagall stood at the edge of the village with Aberforth Dumbledore watching them. McGonagall's face was set, but her eyes were wet. Hermione knew she would never let the tears fall where others could see. "You will not contact anyone by owl," McGonagall said, voice low. "You will not use flu. You will not linger in any place long enough to become predictable." Hermione nodded. Ron nodded. Harry nodded, though inside he felt the sharp, dizzy edge of unreality. Hogwarts had been their center. Without it, the world felt enormous and hostile. McGonagall's gaze lingered on Harry. For a heartbeat, Hermione saw the teacher beneath the warrior. The woman who had watched Harry James Potter grow from a skinny boy into someone the world had demanded too much from. "Mr. Potter," McGonagall said softly. Harry lifted his head. Rain ran down his face like tears. McGonagall's mouth tightened. "I am sorry," she said, and Hermione felt the weight of those words. Sorry for raising him in a world that would eat him. Sorry for every lesson that had been a step toward war. Harry swallowed hard. "I'm sorry too," he whispered. McGonagall's gaze sharpened. "Do not waste time on apologies," she said, voice firm again. "Waste time on winning." Harry nodded once sharply, because if he let himself feel, he would drown. Aberforth grunted. "If you get yourselves killed," he muttered, "don't haunt my pub." Ron managed a cracked, bitter laugh that sounded more like a sob. Hermione's throat tightened. McGonagall lifted her wand and traced a complicated motion in the air. The space around Harry, Hermione, and Ron seemed to shiver, as if the rain itself had thickened. Wards, layers of concealment, of misdirection. Hermione felt them settle, heavy and invisible. "Go," McGonagall said. They turned. Harry James Potter took a step into the muddy road leading away from the village and felt the sudden, brutal truth of exile. There would be no warm bed tonight, no teachers, no castle walls to hold off the dark, only whatever they could build from scraps. They moved quickly, keeping to hedgerows, avoiding open ground. Hermione whispered spells under her breath, testing the air for watchers. Ron kept looking back, as if the castle might call to them. Harry did not look back at first. He couldn't. If he looked, he might run toward the fire and throw himself into it. They reached the edge of a field, and the wind shifted, carrying the smell of wet ash. Harry stopped. He turned. Hogwarts stood on the hill like a broken crown. Flames licked out of a shattered window. The dark mark floated overhead, unchanged, a symbol that felt permanent in the rain. Harry's chest tightened. He saw in his mind the corridors he had walked as a first year, the great hall's candles, Hagrid's smile, McGonagall's sharp praise. He saw friends dead on stone. He saw Neville Longbottom screaming under a burning hat. He saw Voldemort's pale face and the green light. Hermione's hand found Harry's. She squeezed. Ron's hand found Harry's other side. He squeezed too. Harry James Potter turned away from the burning castle. He walked into the dark with his friends flanking him, and the rain fell hard, as if the sky were trying to wash the world clean of blood. By morning, Hogwarts belonged to Tom Marvolo Riddle. He stood on a battlement where students had once leaned to watch the first snowfall, and he looked down at a conquered courtyard. The rain had put out many of the fires, leaving smoke curling from broken windows like ghosts. Death Eaters moved in lines, dragging captives. Giants lurked at the edge of the grounds, bored now that the fight had thinned. Dementors drifted above the treetops like stains on the air. Voldemort lifted the Elder Wand and traced a slow circle. The dark mark pulsed overhead, and the air shivered as wards twisted. Hogwarts's ancient protections strained beneath his commands, resisting, then bending. Not breaking entirely. There were old magics in the stone, stubborn and feral, but bending enough. "Mine," Voldemort whispered, and the word tasted sweet. Behind him, Bellatrix Black Lestrange knelt, laughing softly, her devotion a fever. Yaxley waited, tense, ready to carry orders to London. The world was reorganizing itself around Voldemort's victory like iron filings around a magnet. Voldemort closed his eyes briefly and let his mind stretch. He felt the Ministry's fear. He felt Diagon Alley's panic. He felt the ripple of whispers spreading through Wizarding Britain. Harry Potter is dead. The war is over. Kneel or die. He should have been satisfied. And yet, beneath satisfaction, something irritated him like grit beneath skin. The killing of Harry Potter had not felt complete. He had watched the boy fall. He had watched Narcissa confirm the death. He had watched Hagrid carry the body. He had announced victory. The world had cracked in the way it always did when Voldemort proved himself unstoppable. And still, the Elder Wand's grip in his hand felt faintly wrong, as if it belonged to someone else. He tightened his fingers until his knuckles whitened. "It is mine," he murmured again, as if repetition could make it true. Bellatrix lifted her head, eyes shining. "My lord?" Voldemort's gaze slid down into the courtyard again. "We begin?" he said softly. "We cleanse the school. We remake it." Bellatrix's smile widened, hungry. "Yes, my lord." Voldemort turned away from the battlement and descended into the castle, into stone corridors that would soon echo with new rules, new punishments, new lessons carved into children's bones. Far from the castle, in a small wood where rain clung to leaves and mud sucked at boots, Harry James Potter crouched beneath a low bough and tried to keep his breathing quiet. Hermione Jean Granger knelt beside him, drawing runes in the mud with her wand, sealing them with whispered words. Ronald Bilious Weasley kept watch, eyes narrowed, listening for footsteps that did not belong. The world felt enormous and hostile. Every crack of a branch sounded like pursuit. Every gust of wind sounded like Death Eaters' laughter. Harry stared out into the rain and tried to feel the connection in his scar. Nothing. The silence where Tom Marvolo Riddle's presence had been was both relief and terror. Harry felt as if someone had cut a chain he hadn't realized was holding him up, and now he was free and unanchored. Hermione finished her last ward and looked at Harry, her eyes bright with exhaustion. "We'll rest for an hour," she whispered. "Then we move again." Ron grunted agreement, though his gaze kept flicking to the horizon where a faint, ugly glow marked Hogwarts' smoldering ruin. Harry nodded, though his mind was elsewhere, already mapping out the hunt for Nagini, already thinking of how Voldemort would protect her now, how Voldemort would use the Ministry's reach to wrap the snake in layers of surveillance and violence. Harry's hands trembled. He curled them into fists. Ron noticed. Ron's voice dropped. "Hey," he muttered. "You with us?" Harry swallowed and forced his gaze to Ron's. "Yeah," he said hoarsely. "I'm with you." Hermione's hand found his again, warm despite rain. Harry clung to that warmth like it was proof he still belonged to the living. In the distance, a thunder roll sounded like the castle collapsing again. even though Hogwarts had already fallen. The sky darkened further. The rain kept coming. Harry James Potter closed his eyes for a heartbeat and made himself a promise so fierce it felt like a spell. Voldemort had won the battle. Voldemort had not killed him. And because Harry James Potter still breathed, the war was not over. It had only changed shape, slipping from open fire into shadow, from duels into whispers, from a single night of blood into a long season of hiding and hunting. Harry opened his eyes and stared into the rain. "Not done," he whispered, and the words vanished into the wet air like the first step of a path that would be marked from here on in darkness.